All right, let's continue to unpack this, and I'm joined now by energy expert Chris Yelland. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Here we've heard there is just a great deal of anger. Everyone's cross. Political parties are taking various forms of action. Ordinary citizens are also completely fed up. What Busisiwe Mavuso said, that we're great at making plans, we're just not very good at implementing them. Speaking about the Energy Crisis Committee's plan, which has been publicised today. Do you think that that's fair criticism coming from Busa?
I do, to be honest, and you're right. There is a lot of anger out there, and I can understand why, because the price of electricity is going up by 18% on the 1st of April and a further 12% the following year, and that means a 33% increase in the price of electricity over 2 years. And to rub salt into the wound, we're only getting, we're getting load shed for 8 hours out of every 24 at the moment, which means 33% of the time we don't have electricity, and yet we're getting a 33% price increase. And that really is like rubbing salt into the wound. And people are angry, and it is showing in various, social unrest and protest action, etc. And I'm sure it will have political consequences too.
Yeah, that 33% increase, of course, over 2 successive years of increase, more than 18% coming up in April, unless, of course, the DA is successful. Bloomberg today publishing details of this Energy Crisis Committee plan. And I'm not sure how much is new, how much is actually being done, but I'm going to read you what they're reporting on the first of more than 100 privately owned power plants being developed will connect to the grid by the end of this year. In total, the planned projects could produce 9,000 megawatts, much for the company's own use. We are hearing at the same time, however, that the grid doesn't have the capacity to connect all these new independent power providers. Is that a little bit duplicitous? Does that 9,000 megawatts actually include a lot of companies that are just sorting their own power and not going through the grid?
Look, first of all, just to make sure everyone understands, they're not talking about 9,000 megawatts this year or next year or the next year. This is something that they sort of have a 5-year horizon for. Of course, it's very welcome, but it's not going to provide any relief really this year or next year, because these are longer term issues. And this is what worries me about the plan. There is a lot of emphasis by government, and I must say by big business, on the big solutions. And the big solutions are like a 3-year horizon minimum. By that, I'm talking about the Renewable Energy IPP program, the Risk Mitigation IPP program, and the large customers, the mining customers and the large industries like Sasol, etc., who've got big plans for wheeling of power across the grid. To answer your specific question, when it comes to these big projects, these are generally not on site, as it were, for own generation. They are somewhere geographically separate from the site where the electricity will be used, and they use the grid to transport electricity. And you're right. As such, they need access to the grid, and they need to be able to wheel power across the grid from the point of generation to the point of consumption. And that has got its own challenges. And there is, in certain geographic areas, grid congestion, which makes it difficult for anybody to connect to the grid. I'm talking about the big projects. But what I think is missing, I see it so clearly, in the communications and in the plans that are presented, is the understanding that the aggregation of hundreds and thousands of domestic and commercial and small business owners doing own generation on their rooftops. You don't need access to the Eskom grid. There are not those kind of constraints. And it can be done much quicker and easier, provided the red tape is moved out the way. And one needs to not only allow self-generation, but one needs to have feed-in tariffs to allow these thousands of generators, hundreds of thousands of generators, to generate power, excess power. In other words, when they've got surplus energy over and above their own needs, to be able to deliver this into the grid to help everybody else.
And I think I saw it.
This is just a bureaucratic stumbling block.
So am I understanding you? Am I understanding you correctly that if government provided incentives, perhaps even subsidies, I'm thinking of the farmers, to have their own little solar power system in your own home or for your small business or for your farm, we could sort this problem out quickly and then feed our excess power back into the grids, the sort of stuff Cape Town's trying to do. I think that might be on the list somewhere, but are you saying that's actually quick, small-scale solutions, that you're not seeing the impetus there?
That is the big solution.
Yeah, small solutions added together make a big solution.
Exactly, and it's a big and quick solution that comes at no cost to the fiscus other than some incentives. Now, there could be some tax incentives, there can be some feed-in tariffs, but the capital cost, the big capital costs of the solar PV and inverters and battery storage are done at the cost of the customer, of you and me and business and etc. I do agree with you. There is some mention of it in the plan, but it's really underplayed and downplayed. And it seems to me that government and big business, they don't even understand the customer, the domestic customer and the small business. Big business understands big business, but they are very slow and they're lacking in understanding of the contribution of the small systems, which aggregate to become much bigger than even the big ones.
Yeah, we tend to want big, bold, quick fix statements, and often the devil and perhaps the solution, though, is in the detail. I want to get a comment from you. We're hearing from Davos, our finance minister, Enoch Godongwana, spoke to Reuters, and he's quoted as saying, load shedding will end in 12 to 18 months. Now, first of all, I do not understand why our ministers continue to make these statements and, anyone to do with energy. They keep committing to these deadlines and to these dates that just go whizzing by. Do you think that Enoch Godongwana is right? We also know from Heidi Jacobs that there is a plan to bring more money into the system, which we're probably going to hear about in the budget. But is Enoch Godongwana on planet Earth when he says load shedding will end in 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, look, we've heard it all before. We've heard it from the president. We've heard Gwede Mantashe not saying 18 months. He reckons it can be sorted out in 6 to 12 months. Well, I wish they would just stop talking about it and just do it if they're so sure of themselves. But the reality is that if you look at the details of the plan, there's a heavy emphasis on these big projects, as I say, and those things cannot be delivered that quickly. There's also a heavy emphasis on improving Eskom's energy availability factor, where, the Minister Mantashe says there is like 20,000 megawatts of generation capacity that is idling, that could be brought to the grid. Well, it's completely misleading. It is not idling, it's broken down. When you say there's 20,000 megawatts of generation capacity that is idling, you're implying that it could easily just be switched on. It's just sitting there waiting. You just have to switch it on. That's not the case.
And
it's
does
actually
that
broken down and has to be fixed.
One last quick question. We're also hearing these letters of demand, immediately end load shedding, as if it's an option. I mean, can you immediately end load shedding, Chris? Could you just please do that?
If it was that easy, it would have. If it was that easy, it would have been done a long time ago. The energy availability factor has been on a downward declining trend for the last 5 years, and it cannot suddenly take an upward trend or step change. Before it can go up, the downward trend first has to stabilize, curve down, and then slowly curve up again, because this is an average of 90 generators. You cannot do the work on them all simultaneously. You have to do it progressively over a number of years. So mathematically, it is impossible for it to do that, or a step change and that. It has to come down and stabilize and then slowly go up. And if people who think that you can just turn this around like switching on a tap are completely misguided.
Chris, always great to chat to you. Thank you so much. That's energy expert Chris Yelland, and he's suggesting that the answer to load shedding may well be right on top of your roof. Let's hope it's something government is seriously considering, incentivising individual homes and businesses to get their own power supply.